one of the things that Maya and I found when we were writing this paper, we were looking at the discourse that precedes genocide in genocidal states. And the enhancement of a sense of victimization on the part of one of the groups, usually the group that's going to commit the genocide. First of all, their sense of being victims is much heightened by the demagogues who are trying to stir up this sort of hatred. So they basically say, look, you've been oppressed in a variety of ways, and these are the people who did it, and they're not going to stop doing it, and this time we're going to get them before they get us. It's something like that. And so there's something very pathological about the enhancement of victimization, which is, well, see, that the problem as far as I'm concerned with it is it's not thought through very well. Because there's a point that's being made, and the point is that people have been oppressed and they suffer. And that's true, that point. But then the proper framework from within which to interpret that, I believe, is that that's characteristic of life. You can't take it personally in some sense. And you can't divide the world neatly into perpetrators and victims. And you certainly can't divide the world neatly into perpetrators and victims and then assume that you're only in the victim class and then assume that that gives you certain, like, access to certain forms of redress, let's say. It gets dangerous very rapidly if you do that sort of thing. So, for example...
Alright, stopping it there before he gets to the examples. Welcome to Mika Reaction Reviews. We're reacting to things on the internet, same day, same shirt, different video. And today we are reacting to Dr. Jordan Peterson, one of his old professor clips. And I believe he's talking about, you know, how the dangers of victimization. I stumbled upon this video because I was trying to make a point about how in the red pill community, the toxic side of it, red pill community, how I feel like what it's doing is just creating another victim class in men. And I criticize victim culture and all other aspects of all these other tribes and all these other communities. So I'm not going to not criticize it just because it's men. And I do support men, and I support men's groups and men talking to men. I think that's a very much needed thing. But when I keep hearing the same rhetoric over and over again, how it's like, it's all women's fault and it's all society's fault and the world is against us and no one's ever looking at what they have done, what their fault is, that to me just sounds like victim mindset, because you see it in feminism, you see it in a queer community, you see it in a black community. Is I'm a victim, I'm oppressed, I'm marginalized, the world is against me, systematic this, systematic that, racism this, phobic that, and they never really look at themselves in the mirror and go, what have I done? They don't look at themselves in the mirror as a group, as a community, or as an individual. And what happens is a lot of people who live in that become very, very entitled. Like, I'm entitled to this because I'm black and there was slavery and my ancestors and systematic racism and all these things, patriarchy for women. I'm a female, I'm queer, and so I'm owed all these things because I'm a victim. And even the whole like punching up or punching down sort of scenario where I'm a victim, so I'm allowed to attack you, criticize you, harass you because you're a white cis male and you're oppressed, you're the oppressor and I'm oppressed, and it can become very dangerous, and it gets to the point where the ends justify the means. I can destroy your livelihood because the ends justify the means. And he talked about how like you can't just, you know, categorize people as victims or perpetrators, the oppressed or the oppressors. But that's exactly what Marxism does, neo-Marxism does. That's exactly how they classify it. And they have, you know, declared themselves the victims because that's just how they see it. And because we are the victims, we can do whatever we need to do to destroy the oppressors, even if that's destructive, even if that's dangerous, even if it's genocidal. And so I think a lot of people really need to be careful when it comes to what they're listening to and making sure they're not just falling into another victim class. I even talk about this when it comes to Trump supporters or conservatives. It's like, oh, they did this to us, we need Trump back, he's our hero. It's like, no one's your fucking hero. You have to help yourself. You have to be accountable and self-sufficient for yourself, right? So like Dr. Jordan Peterson said, it's true, you could very well individually be victimized, but living in victim culture isn't gonna help you come out of that. You know what I mean? Trust me, like I can be a victim all day, all day, every day if I wanted to. I'm black, I'm a female, I'm queer, child abuse survivor, I am a sexual assault survivor. If I wanted to sit on my fucking ass all day and bitch and complain about how the world has done me wrong, I could do that. Will it help me in any freaking way at all? No, it wouldn't help me. If I'm not going to make actual real change and policies and stuff like that, if I'm just going to sit on my ass and another group of complainers and bitch and moan all day about how I'm a victim, that's not going to help me. That's not going to help me. That's not going to fix the situation. And that's not going to help the communities that I'm in. So it's not saying that you are not a victim, that men have not been screwed over, but being a victim about it, allowing yourself to coddle yourself in victim culture isn't gonna help. And by the way, before someone comes into my comment section and say, that's not what the red pill says. Yes, it does. Don't act like feminists and pretend it doesn't happen, all right? It does happen. There's different sides of everything, and there's toxic sides of every community, right? And so there are people in a manosphere that gives really, really good advice, and there's some that really does should have just turned men into just another victim class, and what that does is just create anger and resentment and nothing really helpful to society or the communities or that individual person's life, right? It's the same thing what feminists does to women. They just make them angry, they just make them resentful, and these women are now having to go into these relationships almost with their defenses up. That's not good advice for helping people build a healthy romantic or heterosexual romantic relationship, right? It just breaks down communities even further, in my opinion. Anyway, that's why I stumbled upon this, and I just used a small clip in another video to prove a point, but then I decided that I wanted to watch the entire thing. Alright, so we're gonna get back into it, but before you do, if you like type of videos, please like, comment, and subscribe, hit that bell to get the notifications when I do upload. All of that really does help with the algorithm, guys. And if you'd like to support the channel further, you can donate. My PayPal link in the description box below and also in the comment section. Of course, it helps. You don't have to. You can just like, comment, and subscribe. Another great way to support this channel is either join my brand new membership program, different levels, different tiers, different perks, or you can visit my brand new merch shop, links down below. And if you like, you can super thanks. Other than that, sit back, relax, and continue to enjoy the video. Alright, here we go.
One of the things that characterized the Soviet Union, and this was particularly true in the 1920s, but afterwards, so the Soviets were very much enamored of the idea of class guilt. So, for example, although it was only about 40 years previously that the serfs had been emancipated, they weren't much more than slaves, right? And so that was the bulk of the Russian population. They were bought and sold along with the land. So they had been emancipated, and some of them, many of them had turned into independent farmers, and some of them had become reasonably prosperous because, at least in principle, I presume a certain proportion of them from being crooked, but I presume a larger proportion from actually being able to raise food. And of course, at that time, the bulk of the Russian food population was produced by these relatively successful peasant farmers. And relatively successful would mean maybe they had a brick house or something, and maybe they had a couple of cows, and maybe they were able to hire a few people. And so, you know, it wasn't like they were massive landowners or anything. But I've talked to you a little bit about the Pareto principle and the notion that in any domain of activity, a small proportion of people end up producing most of what's in that domain of activity. The same was true in Russia with regards to these peasant farmers. Some of them were extraordinarily efficient, and they produced most of Russia's food. When the communists came in, they described those landholders as parasites, essentially, predicated on the Marxist idea that if someone had extracted profit from an enterprise, that they had basically stolen that profit from the people, say, that they had employed or otherwise oppressed. And so you could be a member of the kulak, K-U-L-A-K, K-U-L-A-K. You could be a member of the kulak class. And then because you were a member of that class, you were automatically guilty. And so what happened was, and you got to think this through to really understand what happened. So what happened was the intellectual communists were sent out in cadres out into these little towns to find people who would help them round up the kulaks. Now you got to think about what a small town is like, because so imagine you're in a town and there's 3 or 4 people or maybe 10 people or something like that who are a little more successful than everyone else. And a certain number of people are going to be fine with that and maybe even happy about it because they regard those people as particularly productive and, you know, as stalwart members of the community, regardless of their flaws. But there's going to be some people who are not happy about it at all. that are going to be very resentful about that and jealous. And so those are going to be people whose characters, I would say, are of the less positive type. And so when the intellectuals came in and described the reason that these people should be treated as parasites and profiteers, then it was the resentful minority in those towns, and that would be the kind of guy that hangs around in the bar all the time and is completely unconscientious and fails at everything and then blames everyone else for it. The intellectuals came in and said, this is unfair that this happened to you. You've actually been victimized, and now it's your opportunity to go have your revenge. And so that's exactly what happened. Now,
wow, yeah, you see that a lot. You see that today. You see that even in other countries with the whole white farmers in Africa being completely brutalized. You'll see a lot of black people or even white progressives sort of almost justify it by saying, oh, well, they stole the land anyway, so who cares if their whole family is being slaughtered, right? You see this in America where sort of Marxist types don't believe that there should be sort of businesses or individual private businesses, that the people who own the business should disperse or divide the business down to the workers, right? Or that's oppressive, or this isn't your land anyway, so you should disperse the wealth. And a lot of people feel like that about most big corporations, that their wealth should be dispersed amongst everyone else because, you know, no one gets this rich without exploitation or without corruption. And again, this isn't really your land, this is Native American land, so how dare you? Anyway, let's continue.
In some of the villages, sometimes the peasants would actually surround the farmsteads of these more successful people and try to defend them, but that never worked out for very long. And so then these mobs, these angry mobs, would go into the farmhouses and strip the place right down to nothing. And they packed these people up and sent them on trains with no food out to Siberia, where there was no place to live. And so that they were packed into houses, you know, maybe they had a square meter each to live in, and all their children died of typhoid, and many of them froze to death. Many people died. Millions of people died as a consequence of the dekulakization, at least as a consequence of its total effect. So what happened then was that there wasn't any food produced. And so then 6 million Ukrainians starved to death in the 1920s. Which is something you never hear about, right? You never hear about that. Why do you never hear about that? That's a question worth asking. You know, it was an absolute catastrophe. They used to, so these people were starving, right to the point of cannibalism, right? I mean, it was ugly as anything you could possibly imagine. If you were a mother, and so you're supposed to hand all your grain into the central committee, mostly for distribution into the cities. You didn't get to keep any for yourself. And so maybe then afterwards, if you were a mother, you'd go out in the fields that had already been harvested, and you'd pick up individual grains of wheat. And if you didn't turn those in, that was death for you. So that's how far it was pushed. So that's a little story about how victimization, how the idea of victimization and perpetration can get out of hand extraordinarily rapidly. And so whenever people are beating the victim drum, you know, they'll cover that up with empathy, roughly speaking. We're speaking on behalf of the oppressed. It's like, maybe you are, but maybe you're no saint because, you know, you're so sure that you're a saint and you're only speaking from the position of good. It's highly unlikely.
Wow, that was really insightful, and I completely agree. It's the whole like road with, you know, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and people are so convinced that they are on the right side of history, that they are the virtuous ones, and they don't realize sometimes they might be repeating history, or they are doing the wrong things, or they're not doing the best for the communities they say they're going to help. I talk about this all the time, where I see a lot of progressives say, we're speaking for the marginalized, we're speaking for black women, queer people, females, whatever, and I'm like, stop. Like, what you're saying isn't actually helpful, but they're so convinced that they are the righteous, that they are the virtuous, that they're never questioning what they're actually doing, what they're saying, and how, like, the long-term causes and effects of the policies and the ideas and the ideologies that they're actually trying to, like, push through, right? Anyway, guys, let me know what you guys think of this in the comment section below, what I said, what Dr. Julia Peterson said. In the comment section below, please like, comment, and subscribe, hit that bell to get notifications when I do upload. All of that really does help with the algorithm, guys. And if you'd like to support the channel further, you can donate. My PayPal link is in the description box below and also in the comment section. Of course, it helps, but you don't have to. You can just like, comment, and subscribe. Another great way to support this channel is either join my brand new membership program, different levels, different different tiers, different perks, or you can visit my brand new merch shop, links down below, and links to all of the eternal platforms I'm on. My socials, including my Twitter, other ways to support me, and other ways to contact me for business is always in the links down below. And if you like, you can super things. I also have a second travel vlog channel. I travel as a lifestyle. I live abroad. If you'd like to know where I am in the world, you can go to the description box below. Also in the comment section, hit the link, go subscribe to my travel vlog channel, and or follow me on my travel Instagram. My stories is usually what's most up to date. They also have my other channel, Speak Freely, links down below, and you guys have an amazing day.